The latest generation of Pokémon has arrived, and with it comes a rich new region to explore and dozens of never-before-seen Pokémon to discover. After sinking my teeth into Pokémon Scarlet, I'm left with a lot of thoughts. And throughout this video, I'll be working through these complicated thoughts with you, a stranger on the internet. But before we begin, bottom line, TLDR, should you buy Pokémon Scarlet and Violet? I mean, yeah, you should. You're voluntarily watching a Pokémon video essay on YouTube, so I imagine you're a fan of the franchise, and you'll find a lot to like here. And the same is true for players who might be checking out this franchise for the first time. Consider that the overall Flygon HG seal of approval. But with that out of the way, let's discuss what I think makes Scarlet and Violet so special, where these games still have a lot of room to improve, and what we can expect in the future. Since the Pokémon franchise was first released in 1996, Game Freak has been releasing the same basic game with a new coat of paint every few years. It's a smart business model. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. Just add a gimmick of choice and you've got yourself a chart-topping video game. It's not a strategy inherent to the Pokémon franchise alone either. Who could forget Marvel's 2008 Iron Man, followed by Marvel's 2015 Iron Man but small, and Marvel's 2016 Iron Man but with magic? People like consistency, and for a long time, Pokémon was the reliable franchise that would deliver an at-minimum playable game that always featured dozens and dozens of new monsters to dazzle their players with. That seems like a pretty jaded look at the history of the Pokémon franchise, but I've honestly loved every single mainline Pokémon game that I've ever played. Sure, I've loved some more than others, but for me, Pokémon has never made a bad or unplayable game. The charm for me has always been getting to catch new Pokémon and start a new journey. It didn't matter that the template was largely the same, because the template was good. Which is why when Game Freak revealed that Pokémon Legends Arceus would be a fairly large departure from the tried and true formula, I have to admit that I bristled a little. In hindsight, the bristling was unwarranted. Despite some minor quibbles, Legends Arceus was a blast for what it was, which was a semi-open world Pokémon game that prioritized catching Pokémon far more than battling. So, with Game Freak having a certified banger under their belt, at least in my book, I was really excited to hear that Scarlet and Violet seemed to be a mixture of the more standard Pokémon template and the more overworld-focused aspects of Legends Arceus. The best case scenario here is that Game Freak would take the best aspects from both and seamlessly merge them into one game, resulting in a 10 out of 10, just the right amount of water video game masterpiece that would have zero detractors and everyone would live happily ever after. Now, we obviously didn't get that, but we got a lot closer than I would have thought. Let's start with the main attraction, the Pokémon. And in this category, much like most generations, Scarlet and Violet pass with flying colors. From the starters to the legendaries and all the random Pokémon in between, the Paldean Pokémon are beautifully designed, with some of them being among my favorites in the entire franchise. The names are phenomenal across the board, and every Pokémon has a clear source of inspiration that is wonderfully brought to life in the 3D world of Paldea. Unlike in Sword and Shield, Pokémon models are far more detailed, allowing for more expressive idle and battle animations that really help you feel the personality of a Pokémon. The cutscene animations with Koraidon in particular are the most expressive I've ever seen a Pokémon, and they put Zacian's vacant expressions in Gen 8 to shame. Are expressive animations a bare minimum that should have been implemented years ago? Probably, but it's still really refreshing to see these Pokémon finally come to life. Older Pokémon also got massive upgrades to their Sword and Shield models, with particular attention paid to the textures of different Pokémon species. No longer does it look like every single Pokémon is made of silicone. Pokémon like Houndour and Houndoom now clearly have fur. Muck's gooey body shimmers in the sunlight. Tarantula's ball of yarn has a clear thread-like look, and Koraidon has finely detailed scales like any reptile would. All of this makes the world of Pokémon that much more immersive, and discovering each and every one of these new Pokémon was an unbelievably fun experience. And it's a good thing that Game Freak put so much effort into the Pokémon themselves, because the rest of Paldea leaves a little bit to be desired. There's no way around it. Although some of the different locations look good enough, particularly in the very beginning of the game, other locations are pretty bland and drab. There's certainly a step above Sword and Shield in general, but games like Breath of the Wild and entries in the Monster Hunter franchise, also on the Switch, put this game to shame. And that's not even factoring in the visual glitches and low frame rates present throughout the game. There's bound to be some glitches that pop up in any game, but for a AAA game from one of the largest video game companies in the world, this isn't excusable. Fortunately, these let's generously call them visual hiccups, really didn't distract from my enjoyment of the game, as the focus of Pokémon for me has always been the Pokémon themselves, and to an extent the characters and story, not so much how good the region itself actually looks. I'd much rather have hundreds of beautifully animated pocket monsters to interact with than slightly more realistic trees. I mean, that's not to say that you can't have both, so it is a valid criticism to have, but these glitches aren't nearly as rampant as social media might make it seem. Despite some less than breathtaking scenery, Paldea does introduce a first into the Pokémon franchise, and that is a truly open-world gaming experience. Routes and towns are seamlessly blended together into one single map that you can explore almost entirely freely and at your own pace. Much like Legends Arceus, battles take place in the overworld and start immediately after interacting with one of the various Pokémon that call Paldea home. Some Pokémon are relaxing in the tall grass, some are swimming in the rivers, lakes, and oceans, and others are flying across the sky, giving a true sense of exploration to your journeys through Paldea. As a lifelong Pokémon fan, it's a sight to behold, and being able to do so in a fully functional co-op multiplayer mode makes it all the sweeter. Just like in Legends Arceus, I spent hours searching for new Pokémon to catch and battle. But unlike Legends Arceus, which had a very linear story that took you from point A to point B, and so on, Scarlet and Violet offer 3 different storylines that let you explore Paldea however you want. And this is where I think that Scarlet and Violet really set themselves apart from the other games in the franchise. Paldea does still have gym leaders, and one of the stories does have you collect all 8 badges and fight against the champion, just like in every other mainline Pokémon game. But the other 2 stories, one that features taking down Paldea's Team Star, and another centered around finding and defeating giant Titan Pokémon throughout Paldea, are equally as compelling, and being able to choose which of the 3 storylines you want to do at any given time, in any given order, is a massive breath of fresh air into a series that has often felt suffocated by its own linearity. I'm almost always in favor of giving the player more options instead of less, so getting to jump between these stories or ignoring some of them entirely is genuinely exciting and adds to Paldea's already rich sense of exploration. That being said, this open world exploration is a little bit better in theory than it is in execution, and it's here where one of my major issues with Scarlet and Violet arises, and that's the fact that these games do not have any level scaling whatsoever. This means that every single gym leader, Team Star Boss, and Titan is at a specific power level that does not change no matter what order you face them in. So even if the game claims you can take on the various boss battles in any order, and technically you can, there is a very clear order in which to do it in. And if you don't do it in that order, or at least close to that order, you're gonna have a rough time. This wildly reduces how much you can actually choose your own adventure. Now, you could level up your Pokémon to level 50 and then face off against one of the higher gym leaders before any of the other ones, so technically, yeah, you can do things out of order, but the downside is that this then completely removes the challenge of the other boss battles that are now aggressively underleveled. This is ridiculously frustrating. But I want to be clear, having overleveled boss battles accessible from the very beginning of an overworld game is not inherently a bad thing. There's a sense of wonder that comes with accidentally running into a boss battle that has you completely outmatched, and it feels truly rewarding to come back later after hours of gameplay and exact your revenge. Who among us didn't feel terrified of the early game Lynels and Guardians in Breath of the Wild, only to effortlessly take them out later in the game after everything's been upgraded? This is a great way to make the player feel a genuine sense of growth throughout the game. But Pokémon is very different from something like Breath of the Wild. In a real-time combat game like Breath of the Wild, there's a certain level of skill that is completely absent from Pokémon. You can technically beat a Lynel with horrible weapons and no armor by expertly dodging and parrying all of their attacks. That's not possible in Pokémon if your team simply gets outsped and one-shot on account of a level disadvantage. Yes, there are strategies and items and gimmicks that you can use, but these are all highly conditional strategies, and they need to be very premeditated, which is not exactly conducive for open-world exploration. And while we're beating this dead horse, if you accidentally run into a Lynel, Link can just run the other way. A luxury that's not granted to the plucky young protagonist of Scarlet and Violet. But even so, none of this would actually be a big deal if A, the game didn't make it seem like you could indeed fight any boss battle in any order, and B, if the game gave you any sort of indication as to what order you're supposed to complete the boss fights in. Other than some vague descriptions on the map, there doesn't seem to be a clear way to tell what the best order is from the game alone. In fact, instead of just not telling you what the right order is, The game takes this a step further and has Nurse Joy actively give you bad information. At any Pokemon Center, you can ask her where to go, and instead of telling you the best boss battle to go to based on the number of boss battles you've already completed, she just gives you the location of the nearest boss battle. Something that I didn't know until this jerk sent my team of level 20 Pokemon to fight the second strongest Titan in the game. I guess she needs to keep her business running somehow. This is a truly baffling decision, and it seems like one made by a team that has very little experience in open world games. The way I see it, there are two very easy solutions to this problem. 1. Simply give more information about the boss battles. It could be as inelegant as someone telling you before the battle that, hey, that giant Dawn fan over there is at level 44. It's gonna murder your entire team. Or at the very least, just order the damn boss battles in the map so that you can make an informed decision. This would still allow for self-paced discovery and exploration, but at least you'd have some sort of bare minimum roadmap. The second solution is a bit more complicated, but that's incorporating a level scaling system. Now, a fully developed level scaling system would be a massive undertaking. It would require designing and coding countless different teams for every single boss battle so that you could take them on in any order. It's not impossible by any means, but I get that it might not be super ideal for a company that already has a fast development cycle. Regardless, a very simple level scaling system would actually get the job done just fine. I'm talking just straight up moving the level of the boss battles up or down based on the number of badges you've already collected. Or just scaling the player's team like they do in online battles. I think this would actually work really well for this game. Later gyms and boss battles would still be pretty difficult, because even at a lower level, they'd still be using fully evolved Pokemon with very powerful moves against the player's first stage Pokemon using moves like Tackle. It would make for a hard challenge, but not an impossible one. It would still encourage a correct route, but it would make exploration and delineation far more rewarding. The potential for a truly expansive, open-world, choose-your-own-adventure style Pokemon game is there, but the execution in Scarlet and Violet isn't quite right. That's not to say that these games aren't ridiculously fun, but I wish that the developers put a little more thought into some of these decisions. I guess that's not really fair. I'm sure they put a lot of thought into everything that went into these games, but I suppose I just mean that I wish that they had came to different, and in my opinion, better conclusions when they thought about it. These weird decisions spread to other aspects of the game as well, and for every great game mechanic change or new introduction, there's something that I ever so slightly brush up against. One of the largest and most radical changes that Scarlet and Violet makes is that you now have the option to auto-battle wild Pokemon in the overworld. With the click of a button, you can send your lead Pokemon out and then sit back and watch as they tear through Pokemon after Pokemon until there's nothing left standing. It's a brilliant way to massively reduce the amount of grinding that was needed in previous Pokemon games. Not only is gaining experience much faster, it's also hilarious to watch your partner gun down a cornered wild Pokemon with nowhere left to hide. And then after each auto battle, your Pokemon reaps the carcass of their fallen victim, collecting materials that can be used to forge TMs, which are once again single use in this generation. Pulling fallen enemies for TM materials a la Monster Hunter is its own form of grinding for sure, but auto battles are undeniably an absolute blast in a way that grinding experience in Pokemon has never been. But here comes Debbie Downer to rain on Scarlet and Violet's parade, because this mechanic is definitely a little rough. Recalling and sending out Pokemon can be a little unresponsive at times, and because the auto battles are so quick and take place so effortlessly, when Pokemon level up as a result, they don't learn new moves, and they also don't evolve. The former isn't a huge deal, because much like Legends Arceus, you can change your Pokemon's moveset at any time from within your party menu. The latter is a much more annoying issue though, because it means that in order to evolve your Pokemon, you need to make sure that they level up within an actual battle, not from an auto battle. Legends Arceus cleverly addresses this issue by telling you when a Pokemon could evolve, and then letting you evolve the Pokemon from the party menu. But for some reason, this option is bafflingly not in Scarlet and Violet, which is honestly just stupid, and it makes an otherwise nearly flawless grinding system much, much clunkier, especially during first-time playthroughs and for players who are new to the franchise. And clunky implementations like this are everywhere. Auto-healing lets you instantly heal your party Pokemon, but it doesn't heal status moves. You can access the box at any time, but you can't change the nickname or movesets of any Pokemon without first moving them into your party, closing the box, and then going into the party menu. Set mode is also completely removed from the game, meaning that if you want to play with standard hardcore Nuzlocke rules, you'll need to enforce it manually. That's a little frustrating because in some ways these games are perfect for nuzlocking, but we'll save that for another video. None of these game mechanic issues actively ruined my experience. I mean, if anything, a lot of them are just glorified nitpicks. But combined with the open but not really world, and the less than stellar graphics and performance issues, it does make Scarlet and Violet feel more than a little bit unpolished. Still, the underlying gameplay is so much fun. The new Pokémon are incredible. The boss battles are a blast and actually pretty challenging. The characters that populate Paldea are also really well designed and a lot of fun. And terastallization, which I haven't even touched on in this video, is an interesting gimmick that's not nearly as game-breaking as something like Dynamax. There is so much to discover in these games, and I've only just scratched the surface. Despite my problems with them, I truly think that Scarlet and Violet are wonderful games with a lot to satisfy both novice and veteran players alike. Over the next few weeks, months, and years, I'll be pouring countless hours into them as I start doing Nuzlocks and getting into the competitive scene. If anything, many of the faults in this game are because Game Freak was almost too ambitious by trying to make an open world game, and it's very clearly a first attempt at doing so. The plus side is that it seems like open world Pokemon games are the future moving forward, and as Game Freak learns from what did and didn't work in Scarlet and Violet, their games will only get better and better. No matter what type of fan you are, it has never been a better time to be a Pokemon fan, unless you're a fan of Flagon who isn't even in the game. But despite that personal attack, I somehow still like Scarlet and Violet. So if that doesn't speak to the quality of these games, I don't know what will. Thank you all for watching. If you made it this far, I really appreciate all your support, and it'd be great if you could like the video and subscribe to the channel. Or don't, I don't know. This is my first video essay on the channel in quite some time, and I'm really proud of it, but please let me know what your thoughts are in the comments down below, and what other subjects you'd like to see me cover in this style, whether it's related to Nuzlocke or something entirely different. Stay tuned for more Scarlet and Violet content, and until then, remember to always, always, always play around the critical hit.